The story begins with Brett Westfeldt, a boy who feels annoyed. He goes to wake up his older brother, Alan, because their dad, Craig, wants to see Alan. Brett thinks Alan is lazy and not good at anything. He opens Alan's door and wake him up cause dad is calling him. Soon after, Brett walks down the hallway, grumbling the whole time, with Alan quietly following behind. Brett complains that Alan is useless and says he wishes he didn't have a brother like him. But secretly, Brett feels a little happy because today is the last day Alan will be his brother. Alan doesn't say anything and just ignores Brett's words. When they get to their dad's room, Craig looks very unhappy with Alan. He tells Alan he's disappointed because Alan is 15, but his magic is still at level 1. On top of that, Alan didn't get any blessings from the gods during the last ceremony. This made the family feel ashamed. There, Craig finally tells Alan that he's no longer part of the family and kicks him out of the house. Alan is now on his own. After the meeting, Alan left the grand house of the Westfeldt family. He felt lighter, as if a huge burden had been lifted. He had never wanted to be part of a complicated, noble family, and now that he was no longer tied to them, he could finally look for the life he had always dreamed of. Shortly after, Alan headed straight for the eastern border of the Westfeldt lands. This place was far from prying eyes, and he knew it would be peaceful there. As he walked through the quiet forest, he felt calm. After traveling far enough, he stopped to rest, enjoying the fresh air and the beauty of nature around him. Not far from where Alan was, a brave knight named Beatrice Alarido was battling a dangerous magical creature called a clay wolf. She was protecting her mistress, Reese Adestella, who was traveling through the area. The clay wolves attacked suddenly, and Beatrice was doing her best to fight them off. The battle became harder as more wolves appeared. Beatrice knew she had to protect Reese, so she tried to hold off the wolves to keep her safe. Even though it was dangerous, Reese refused to leave Beatrice behind. From the forest, Alan saw what was happening. He noticed the two surrounded by the clay wolves. He couldn't understand why Reese, the first princess of the Adestella kingdom, was traveling with only one knight to protect her. It seemed strange and very risky to him. Then, Alan thought back to the time when he first met Reese as a child. It was at a royal meeting where he heard someone making fun of him, calling him useless. Alan didn't say anything and just stayed quiet, but Reese stood up for him. She told the person to apologize and even said Alan was an amazing person. This surprised Alan because most people usually look down on him. Reese's kindness was something he never forgot. In the present, Alan saw Reese crying because Beatrice was badly hurt during the clay wolf attack. Reese called out his name, and Alan appeared just in time. Using a powerful spell, Alan defeated all the magic creatures. Reese watched in awe, amazed at how easily Alan destroyed the clay wolves. Beatrice was getting weaker, and Reese begged her to stay strong. At that moment, Beatrice could only whisper an apology, saying she owed her life to Alan. After making sure all the clay wolves were gone, Alan went to Reese and Beatrice. He used a healing light spell, and Beatrice quickly recovered. She was shocked at how fast she healed, and both Reese and Beatrice couldn't hide their curiosity about Alan's magic. But Alan didn't want to tell them anything about his powers. He kept his magic a secret, something connected to a life he had before. Soon after, Alan decided to change the topic and asked Reese why she was in such a dangerous place. Reese explained that a few days ago, she received a message from God. The message told her to go to the border to meet God Clone. Even though it was risky, she traveled there with Beatrice to avoid misfortune, but they ended up facing the dangerous clay wolves. There, Reese admitted that without Alan's help, she and Beatrice might not have survived the attack. Then, feeling curious, Reese asked why Alan was at the border. Instead of answering right away, Alan suggested they continue their journey and talk on the way, as staying there too long could attract more magic monsters. Using his healing light magic, Alan quickly repaired the horse-drawn carriage Reese and Beatrice had been traveling in. Once the carriage was ready, the three of them set off together. During the ride, Alan shared that he had been expelled from the Westfeldt family. Reese was shocked and couldn't believe how unfairly the Westfeldt family had treated him. After traveling for a while, they arrived at an empty village. Reese thought the villagers must have run away because of a magic monster attack. But Alan wasn't so sure. He didn't feel the presence of any magic monsters nearby, which made him think something else might have happened. Since the village was empty, they decided to keep walking until they reached the next village. When they arrived, they saw a group of villagers chasing away a woman named Akira Kazuragi. Curious about what was happening, Alan and the others went over to talk to Akira. As Akira introduced herself and began explaining, her stomach growled loudly, showing how hungry she was. Feeling bad for her, they all agreed to find a nearby place to eat. At the restaurant, Akira shared her story. She told them about meeting a little girl named Sarah in the forest. Sarah had been running away, scared and alone. When Akira asked why, Sarah explained that the villagers wanted to sacrifice her to a dragon that lived near the village. Akira said she went to the village head to ask why they were doing this. But instead of explaining, the village head told her to stay out of their business. Akira couldn't stand the idea of the little girl being sacrificed, so she decided to hide Sarah in a cave in the forest. Akira then shared her plan to defeat the dragon so it would stop threatening the villagers and asking for sacrifices. Impressed by her bravery and determination to protect Sarah, Alan and the others decided to help Akira fight the dragon and save the village. Without wasting time, the group of four headed straight for the mountain where the dragon lived. After discussing their plan in the forest, they climbed the steep cliff using ropes, determined to face the dragon. When they reached the top, Akira spotted a huge red dragon waiting for them. The dragon suddenly attacked, and Akira fought back bravely, but her attacks didn't seem to hurt it. To their surprise, the dragon began speaking, revealing that it had tricked Akira into coming to the cliff. Frustrated, Akira attacked again, but the dragon remained strong. Just then, Alan arrived at the top and jumped in to help. With a powerful swing of his sword, he cut the dragon's wings. The dragon roared in pain and fought back fiercely, but Alan used a spell to strike it. The dragon tried to flee, but with Reese cheering him on, Alan chased after it and delivered the final blow, defeating the mighty creature. The next morning, Alan woke up under a tree, hearing Reese's cheerful voice as she greeted him. When he asked about Akira and the others, Reese pointed to them practicing sword fighting nearby. While Alan and Reese chatted, Akira called out to Alan, challenging him to a friendly sparring match. After finishing their practice, Akira and Sarah said goodbye to Alan, Reese, and Beatrice. Before they left, Reese asked Akira to take good care of Sarah, the little girl they had saved from the dragon. Akira smiled and promised she would protect her. Meanwhile, in another place, Craig was in his home, speaking to Horace through a hologram. Craig was furious because the red dragon had been defeated, ruining their plan to harm Reese. Horace guessed someone might step in to defeat the dragon, so they decided on a new plan using an elf to go after Reese and seek revenge on the kingdom and the gods. At the same time, Alan, Reese, and Beatrice continued their journey to Granholm City. They were going there so Reese's friends could repair Alan's sword, which had broken during the fight with the dragon. That night, they stopped to rest in the forest. Alan used his magic to light a warm campfire, and Reese and Beatrice couldn't hide their amazement at his abilities. As they sat around the fire, Reese grew sleepy and, without realizing it, nodded off on Alan's lap. When she woke up briefly, she felt embarrassed and apologized, but Alan didn't mind at all. Feeling comfortable, Reese eventually rested her head on Alan's shoulder and fell into a deep sleep. Watching her sleep peacefully, Alan's mind drifted back to their first meeting as children, remembering how kind she had been to him. The next morning, they arrived in Granholm, a bustling city filled with the noise of the busy market. As they walked through the crowded streets, they finally reached the house of Reese's blacksmith friend, Noel Leonhardt. Inside, the walls were lined with shiny swords and sharp weapons made by Noel. But to their surprise, they found Noel lying on the floor. Reese quickly checked on her and realized Noel wasn't hurt cause she had just fallen asleep from exhaustion. Reese explained to Alan and Beatrice that Noel often skipped eating, drinking, or sleeping when she was focused on making swords. After Noel woke up, Alan asked her if she could make him a new sword since his old one had broken. At first, Noel said no because she had many other orders to finish. But when Alan showed her the broken sword, she recognized it as a holy sword. Seeing how special it was, Noelle agreed to make a new one for Alan. Once she finished talking, Noelle shooed them out of her house, saying she needed to start working right away and didn't want anyone bothering her. Then, Alan, Reese, and Beatrice decided to look for a place to stay in the city. What they didn't notice was a girl named Mylene secretly watching them from a distance. After observing them, Mylene quickly went to report back to Horace. At an inn, Reese suggested that Alan visit the Adventurers Guild with Beatrice to sell the dragon scales he had collected after defeating the Red Dragon. Reese explained that dragon scales are very rare and can be sold for a lot of money. Soon after, Alan and Beatrice went to the Adventurers Guild. When the guild staff saw the dragon scales, they were shocked to find out they were from a red dragon. They quickly went to inform the head of the guild branch to take a closer look at the scales. While Alan and Beatrice were waiting, Horace and Mylene appeared and asked Alan how he had gotten the dragon scales. Before Alan could answer, the guild staff returned, having finished assessing the scales. Strangely, at the same moment, Horace and Mylene left without saying anything. Later, Alan, Reese, and Beatrice went back to Noelle's house to pick up Alan's new sword. They found Noelle sleeping on the floor again, completely exhausted from her work. When she woke up, she proudly showed Alan the sword she had crafted. Alan was thrilled because it looked amazing and felt perfect in his hands. Not long after, Noelle asked Alan to go with her into the forest to test his new sword. As they walked, Noelle told Alan about her past. She explained that she was raised by a dwarf and never knew her real parents. One day, when she was little, a blacksmith named Vanessa saved her life. Noelle ended up living with Vanessa and learning how to become a blacksmith. She shared how she often saw Vanessa take breaks while making swords, and now she has the same habit. As they continued through the forest, Horace and Mylene suddenly appeared to confront Alan again. But before they could say much, Noelle shouted for help cause she was being attacked by a magic monster. Alan quickly ran to her side and used his new sword to defeat the monster. After the danger passed, Alan and Noelle kept walking deeper into the forest. Soon, they came across a giant monster sleeping under the trees. Noelle told Alan that this was the monster that had killed Vanessa and asked him to defeat it. But Alan shook his head and said he had no reason to kill it. Frustrated, Noelle grabbed Alan's sword and tried to attack the monster herself. However, her attack didn't work. The monster, a powerful Fenrir, was protected by magic that made it immune to weaker attacks. Alan explained that only high-class weapons, like holy swords, could break through the Fenrir's defense. Noelle argued that the sword she made was even stronger than a holy sword, but the Fenrir didn't budge. In the end, Alan decided not to fight the Fenrir and left the forest, heading back to the inn. Despite her disappointment, Noelle followed him, still thinking about what she could do to defeat the monster. After meeting Reese and Beatrice, Alan told them about the Fenrir monster he saw in the forest. Reese thought the monster's presence might be connected to the mysterious death of Cyril, the kingdom's strongest general, 3 months ago. No one knew who the killer was, but many believed a devil was responsible. Alan, however, doubted that a devil was behind Cyril's death. Beatrice added that some people in the kingdom were secretly working with devils, which could explain what happened. Alan then shared his earlier encounter with Horace and Mylene, leaving Reese and Beatrice surprised. Meanwhile, Mylene, who had seen Alan defeat monsters in the forest, reported everything to Horace. After hearing this, Horace gave Mylene a shocking order to get rid of Reese immediately. At that time, Mylene hesitated, but Horace demanded she follow through. Back at Noelle's workshop, she was still busy repairing Alan's incomplete sword. Exhausted from working so hard, Noelle fell asleep. In her dream, she saw a memory of Vanessa being attacked by the Fenrir monster. In the dream, Alan appeared and fought the monster, forcing it to run away. Seeing Vanessa so helpless in her dream made Noelle cry. When she woke up, determined and emotional, she went straight back to work, focused on completing Alan's sword. After finishing Alan's sword, Noelle went into the forest alone to fight the Fenrir monster. When she got close, the giant monster woke up and quickly knocked her down when she tried to attack. Just then, Horace appeared and asked Noelle if she was an elf who had lived with dwarves. Noelle ignored his question and blamed him for Vanessa's death. She tried to attack Fenrir again, but the monster was too strong and threw her back again. Horace then told Noelle to join him because she had a special power called the Fairy Emperor's Power. He even said she could be important, like Mylene, if she worked for him. But Noelle refused, saying she would rather die than follow him. Angry, Horace ordered Fenrir to attack her. Luckily, Alan arrived just in time to save her. Meanwhile, in the city, Mylene tried to attack Rhys, but Beatrice stopped her. Beatrice used her sword skills to stop Mylene and keep Rhys safe. Back in the forest, Horace told Fenrir to attack Alan. Alan fought bravely and defeated the monster. Horace got scared and ran away. After the fight, Alan carried Noelle back to the inn so she could rest and recover. When they arrived, Alan and Noelle saw Mylene tied to a chair, with Rhys and Beatrice standing nearby. Noelle demanded to know why Mylene had attacked them, but Mylene didn't say anything. Rhys, however, believed that Mylene wasn't a bad person and wouldn't try to hurt her without a reason. After a moment, Mylene admitted that she had no home because someone had burned it down. Hearing this, Noelle remembered how Vanessa had saved her when she was younger. Thinking of this, Noelle decided to untie Mylene, surprising everyone. Noelle said she wanted to help Mylene, just like Vanessa had helped her. Overwhelmed, Mylene began to cry, thankful that someone still cared about her. Later, Alan went off by himself to a quiet spot to practice with his sword. Meanwhile, Horace met with a demon and went to see Craig and Brett. The demon told them he had completed Craig's order, but Brett doubted the demon's strength. This made the demon angry, and he promised to defeat Rhys and Noelle. Brett, on the other hand, said he would take care of the kingdom's archbishop. In a flashback to Rhys's childhood, she was traveling in a horse-drawn carriage with her uncle, Alfred Baverstam. Suddenly, a monster attacked them. Alfred told Rhys to stay in the carriage while he fought the monster. To protect her, Alfred pulled the monster with him into a deep abyss, sacrificing himself to save Rhys. In the present, Alan and his friends were walking through a village filled with excitement as everyone prepared for the annual Spirit Welcoming Festival. The villagers explained that during the festival, people wore colorful costumes and danced together to celebrate. Curious, Alan asked if anyone had seen a person in silver armor, but the villagers shook their heads. So, Alan and his friends decided to visit Noelle's house to ask her instead. At Noelle's house, she shared a spooky story from a neighboring village. She told them about a general who was murdered and whose spirit turned into a royal ghost. The ghost, dressed in silver armor stained with blood, was said to wander the area at night, holding a grudge against the royal family. And Beatrice, who was terrified of ghosts, screamed in fear as Noelle told the story. To ease her fear, Rhys suggested they visit the place where the ghost was often seen to figure out the truth. Soon after, Rhys and her friends arrived at the neighboring village. When they asked about the figure in silver armor, a strange villager with pale eyes offered to take them to the village head's house, saying the village head would know more about what was going on. Alan noticed the man had been near the cemetery and asked what he was doing there. The man simply said he was passing by before quickly walking away. Left with more questions, Alan and his friends continued on to meet the village head, curious to learn what he knew. When the village head heard why Alan and his friends had come, he explained that their village was far from the city, so they didn't know much about the silver-armored figure. Since it was getting late, the village head invited them to stay overnight and enjoy the festival the next day. That night, everyone stayed in the village. While sleeping, Rhys had a dream about her childhood. In the dream, she was happily playing in the park and saw her uncle, Alfred, who she always called father, even though he wasn't her real dad. In the dream, Alfred was wearing shiny silver armor. He told Rhys he had to go to the battlefield but promised to return after the war. The memory made Rhys feel happy but sad at the same time. Suddenly, the dream shifted, and Rhys woke up to the sound of the window opening. When Rhys went to check, she saw someone who looked like Alfred outside. Without thinking, she ran out of the house to follow him. She kept running until she found herself in the graveyard, where a ghost suddenly grabbed her feet. Scared, she screamed for Alan, then realized it was just a bad dream. When she woke up, Alan was already in her room. He hugged her gently to calm her down and let her know she was safe. The next night, the festival began. The village was full of excitement as people wore ghost costumes, lit big bonfires, and danced happily together. Reese, Alan, and Beatrice watched the festival from a distance until a villager invited them to join the fun. Alan and Beatrice were excited and quickly joined in the dancing, but Reese decided to stay and watch. While Alan and Beatrice were away, Reese saw her uncle, Alfred, again. She followed him into the forest, calling out to him. Alfred reminded her not to wander alone because it was dangerous, but Reese replied that she wasn't scared as long as he was with her. She told him she had been searching for him, convinced he was still alive even after falling into the ravine. Alfred then revealed a shocking truth that he could also be a danger to her. He admitted that he held a grudge against the royal family. He explained that the kingdom feared people with gifts like him and Reese because of their special powers and treated them like threats. Alfred tried to convince Reese to join him in taking revenge on the kingdom, but Reese refused, saying she couldn't agree with his plan. Angry at her refusal, Alfred suddenly attacked Reese. Just in time, Alan arrived to protect her. Alan quickly realized that this wasn't truly Alfred, cause it was a spirit controlled by a devil. A fierce duel broke out between Alan and Alfred. Using all his strength, Alan managed to defeat Alfred. Before disappearing, Alfred said a final goodbye to Reese and asked Alan to take care of her. As the rain poured down, Reese stood there crying, heartbroken over losing her uncle once again. Later, the village head went to meet Alan, who was standing in the tower. He asked Alan when he had figured out that the village was controlled by demons. Alan calmly replied that he had known from the start that the villagers were actually dead people being controlled by the village head. Angry, the village head commanded the ghostly villagers to attack Alan. But Alan used his magic to defeat all the ghosts and protect himself. Meanwhile, at the Westfeldt residence, a devil reported its failure to Craig and Brett through a hologram. Brett was furious about the news, but Craig tried to calm him down and keep him focused. The next morning, Reese, Alan, and Beatrice left the ghost village in a horse-drawn carriage. As they traveled, Alan held a strange stone he had found during the fight with the village ghosts. He was puzzled why the stone which stored Brett's power had been inside the ghosts. At the same time, Reese received an urgent hologram message from her soldiers. They told her that Cyril, the general who had been reported dead, had mysteriously returned to the kingdom. In a flashback, a young Alan stood quietly at his mother's funeral, looking sad. His mother had always stood up for him and protected him from Craig, who had seen both Alan and Brett as failures from the beginning. In the present, Alan woke up feeling angry. He had realized that his family was working with a devil to harm Reese. Determined to find out the truth, Alan went to confront Craig. He demanded to know why Craig and Brett wanted to get rid of Reese. Craig laughed and explained that he wanted revenge on the Adastella kingdom and the gods because he believed he was the only one worthy of ruling the kingdom. Meanwhile, in the Adastella kingdom, rumors about Cyril's return were spreading among the people. Everyone was confused since Cyril had been reported dead. Two royal knights, Edward and Clark, were walking through the city, also talking about these rumors. Edward told Clark to stay on guard because Cyril's return might bring trouble to the kingdom. As they walked through a narrow alley, the archbishop suddenly appeared in front of them. Edward was surprised and asked why the archbishop was there without any royal guards. Instead of answering, the archbishop invited Edward to talk privately. Although reluctant, Edward followed him. Shortly after, the archbishop led Edward to an empty building. Edward grew suspicious and asked why they were there. Suddenly, Craig appeared and attacked Edward, revealing that the archbishop was secretly on Craig's side. Realizing he had been tricked, Edward tried to fight back, knowing Craig wanted to eliminate him. Meanwhile, Brett was riding in a carriage pulled by horses. As he looked out the window, he started to think about his childhood with Alan. He remembered the time when they had just lost their mom. Brett was crying, missing their mom so much, and Alan tried to cheer him up. Brett had asked if he was a failure, like Craig had said, but Alan told him he wasn't. He reminded Brett that everyone is good at different things. As they grew up, Brett got really good at magic faster than Alan. He even became stronger before Alan did. This made Craig call Alan a failure, because he wasn't as quick to master magic as Brett. Brett didn't like it when Craig humiliated Alan, but Alan just stayed quiet and didn't argue. Feeling upset and frustrated, Brett decided to leave Alan. Now, in the present, Brett was still riding in the carriage when a scary demon appeared next to him. This demon was someone Brett had made a deal with. They started talking, and Brett admitted that he had tricked the Archbishop into helping him set a trap for Edward, a very strong knight. Brett was sure their plan to get revenge on the kingdom and the gods would work. Soon, another demon showed up and promised to give Brett even more power to defeat the royal knights. But the demon warned Brett that if he lost, there would be a big punishment waiting for him. And Brett, feeling sure of himself, accepted the offer. He said there was no way he would lose. In the busy city, Akira was walking with Sarah when two scary demons stopped them. The demons attacked Sarah and put a strange magic seal on her. They explained that everyone in the city had this seal, and it could make them explode. Hearing this, Sarah didn't want Akira to get hurt, so she tried to move away from him. But Akira hugged her tightly and said that a soldier never runs away. At the same time, Clark and some royal soldiers were walking through a narrow alley. Clark told them he was worried about Edward, who had gone off with a suspicious archbishop. Suddenly, a demon appeared in front of them and said that the archbishop had been telling the people how the gods had made them slaves. The archbishop had told the citizens to break free from the gods. Then, Brett showed up and used his magic called marionette to summon a giant stone monster. The archbishop told everyone that Brett's marionette magic would bring a new, brighter future for them. As everyone watched in fear, another demon appeared, making the people panic. But Brett calmed them down and said he had teamed up with the demons to create a kingdom where they wouldn't have to follow the gods anymore. Meanwhile, Craig was still battling Edward. Craig had grown much stronger, making the fight really tough for Edward. Even though he was struggling, Edward didn't give up and kept fighting with all his might. On the other hand, Clark stayed strong even when the demon tried to make him join Brett's side. He refused to betray the kingdom and stood ready to protect it. This made the demon very angry, so it attacked Clark and his soldiers. But just when they were in danger, Beatrice arrived to help fight the demon and protect everyone. Meanwhile, Craig had just defeated Edward when a figure in a black robe appeared. At first, Craig thought it was a demon, but it turned out to be Akira. She had come to save her uncle, Edward, and help him fight Craig. In another part of the city, Brett was happy because his plan was working. Many people started to believe his lies, and he thought he had won. But then Alan arrived with someone wearing a yellow robe. Brett got angry when Alan showed up with a hologram that exposed his evil plans. The hologram showed a conversation between Beatrice and a demon. It revealed that Brett and Craig had teamed up with demons to harm Reese and others in the kingdom with special powers. The townspeople were shocked when Brett accidentally admitted the truth, proving that the hologram was real and his plans were evil. Under the yellow robe, Reese revealed herself, showing everyone that she was still alive. The townspeople were shocked and realized that Brett had planned to kill her. Reese calmly confirmed it, helping the people see that Brett had been tricking them all along. Angry that his plan was exposed, Brett used his marionette magic to control soldiers and make them attack Alan. But Alan quickly destroyed the magic ropes, which made Brett even more furious. Brett then summoned a huge magic monster to destroy the city. While the people panicked, Reese stayed calm and told everyone to find a safe place to hide. When Brett tried to attack Alan again, Alan defeated him with just one powerful hit. At the same time, Beatrice was battling a demon. Mylene stepped in to help by throwing a knife at the demon, giving Beatrice the perfect chance to strike it with her sword. Together, Beatrice and Mylene worked as a team and finally defeated the demon. After the fight, Clark thanked Beatrice and Mylene for helping him and his soldiers. He told them that demons were attacking many parts of the capital. Hearing this, Beatrice asked Clark and his troops to move quickly to stop the chaos. Just then, Noelle arrived with a collection of weapons she had made, which Clark and the soldiers could use to fight off the demons. Meanwhile, Akira and Edward were still battling Craig, who began showing off his special magic power called Undertaker. This power let him see the future. While fighting, Craig admitted he was angry at the gods for not saving his wife, Mariel, when she died. He became even more upset when he realized his son didn't have a magic gift like other kids. This made Craig decide to get rid of everyone who had magic gifts. As Craig's power grew stronger, Akira tried to cast a magic spell to stop him. But Craig's dark magic was too powerful, and Akira was thrown hard into a wall. Edward then stepped in and tried to make Craig understand that the power he was using came from the devil. But Craig didn't care and attacked Edward, killing him. Akira was heartbroken to see her uncle die. Just as Craig was about to attack Akira, Alan arrived just in time to save her. He worked to stop Craig's dark magic, which had turned the sky black. Without hesitating, Alan fought back with his own magic and, after a fierce battle, finally defeated his father. After Alan saved the kingdom of Adistella, the king thanked him and offered him the title of Duke from the Westfeldt family. But Alan didn't want the title. He told the king that he just wanted to live a free life, something he had always dreamed of, even in his past life. After leaving the palace, Alan met Mylene and Noel. They started talking about whether he would go back to Granholm, the place he came from. While they were chatting, Reese suddenly appeared. She grabbed Alan's hand and told him to come with her to Granholm. Meanwhile, in the Victor Empire, a noblewoman named Henriette Linkvis sat quietly, wondering why she had been reborn into a new life. Back in her past life, Henriette had cried and apologized to Alan when he was close to dying. She told him that he was the hero she had always been waiting for. But strangely, this was all part of a dream that Alan hadn't had in a very long time. One morning, Alan came out of his room and sat down to have breakfast with Reese, Noel, and Mylene. While they were chatting, an employee from the Adventurers Guild named Nadia showed up. She had a big stack of papers for Alan to work on. Nadia grabbed Alan's hand, trying to take him to the guild. But Noel quickly stopped her, saying Alan needed to test the sword with her first. Not wanting to be left out, Reese and Mylene also jumped in, each trying to take Alan with them. After a while, Alan managed to escape the chaos. He lay on the grass outside, looking up at the sky and enjoying a peaceful moment. Later, Alan gathered with Reese, Noel, and Mylene to share his plans. He told them he wanted to travel to the Victor Empire to find a nice, quiet place to live. Noel and Mylene got excited and decided to go with him. Reese, who had royal duties in Granholm, didn't want to miss out either. She decided to hand over all her responsibilities to Beatrice so she could join the journey. Not long after, the four of them set off for the Victor Empire in a horse-drawn carriage, leaving Granholm in Beatrice's care. As the carriage traveled along a steep and bumpy road, Noel grumbled about how hard it was to move forward. Suddenly, the carriage came to a stop. Alan spotted a group of sand wolves blocking their path. Without hesitation, Alan used his sword and quickly defeated the magical creatures. Once the road was clear, they continued their journey. When they reached the Victor Empire, Alan and his friends explored the busy streets filled with people and noise. While walking, Alan accidentally bumped into a girl named Henriette, someone he had known in his previous life. They greeted each other, and Henriette immediately recognized Reese as the princess of the Adistella kingdom. She asked why they had come to the Victor Empire. Before they could explain, Henriette warned them to leave the empire right away. She told them that the Black Wolf Squad, the empire's most dangerous soldiers, had been sent out to arrest anyone who looked suspicious. As Henriette turned to leave, Alan ran after her. He wanted to know if her warning came from her role as an imperial daughter or because she was connected to the gods. Alan also realized that Henriette was the reincarnation of someone he knew from his past life. When he asked how she was reborn, Henriette explained that it was because of Alan's fate that she had been brought back to life. Soon after, Henriette quickly told Alan to leave the empire as soon as possible. Before they could move, a loud explosion shook the ground, and a man suspected of causing it ran straight toward Alan. Alan stepped forward and tried to stop him. Afterward, the captain of the Black Wolf Squad, Lisette, arrived. She questioned Alan about what had happened. Alan explained that he was only protecting himself because the man almost ran into him. But Lisette didn't trust him and accused him of being a devil. Before Lisette could do anything, Mylene used her magic to help Alan vanish from sight. Angry, Lisette ordered her troops to block every exit in the empire. In a hidden passageway, Alan thanked Mylene for saving him. A moment later, Reese and Noel joined them, bringing Henriette along. Henriette informed them that all the exits from the Empire had been sealed. She then offered to take them to her house so they could hide. At Henriette's home, Alan asked her what was really happening in the Victor Empire. Henriette explained that the Emperor had been murdered a year ago. Since then, the Black Wolf Squad had been hunting for the killer, who was still on the loose. To keep them safe, Henriette suggested that Alan and his friends stay at her house until the danger passed. In the evening, Henriette found Alan standing on the balcony, looking out at the night sky. Alan shared his suspicion that the chaos in the Empire was caused by the devil. Henriette agreed and told him something shocking, that after disappearing in front of Lisette, Alan was now being accused of murdering the Emperor. Later, back inside, Henriette told Alan how much she admired him as a hero. She revealed that she had always been watching over him. She also explained that one reason she was reincarnated was to help him find happiness in his new life. The next day, Noel grew tired of staying indoors and asked Henriette if she and Mylene could go out for a bit. After getting permission, they headed to the market, where they enjoyed delicious foods and explored the lively streets. But suddenly, a group of elves approached them, making Mylene feel uneasy. She quickly urged Noel to leave. When they returned to Henriette's house, Noel and Mylene told her what had happened at the market. Henriette then suggested they visit the elf forest, a peaceful place where a community of elves lived. When they arrived, the elves and a guardian named Percival greeted them warmly. To everyone's surprise, the elves called Noel their leader. At that moment, Noel was confused, but Henriette explained that Noel was a descendant of the Elf King and was meant to lead the elves in the forest. Shortly after, Percival invited Noel and the others to explore the elf forest. While they were walking, some children came over to give gifts to Noel, making her smile with joy. But then a boy named Philip, who was also an elf, showed up and said those kids were troublemakers. There, Percival quickly told Philip to go play and not bother them, which made him annoyed. Noel was curious about what Philip meant, but Percival told her not to worry about it. That night, back in the Empire, Lisette met with a Black Wolf soldier named Oswald. She ordered him to find the entrance to the elf forest so they could search for Alan. Meanwhile, in the elf forest, the elves held a gathering to welcome Noel as their leader. During the celebration, Percival talked to Alan and explained that the elves hadn't had a leader in over 10 years, and because of this, they couldn't have children. Luckily, Henriette had been helping them. She also told them about an elf blacksmith who had the eyes of the Elf King. Henriette often brought items from the outside world, teaching the elves about life beyond the forest. Alan noticed there were many children among the elves and asked if Henriette had brought them there. Percival explained that 3 years ago, Henriette had convinced the elves to take in children of devils. At first, the elves didn't want to, but Henriette persuaded them to give the devil children a safe home in the forest. At night, Noel and her friends rested in a cozy treehouse in the elf forest. Mylene felt worried and told Noel she was scared they wouldn't be able to play together anymore if Noel became the leader of the elves. Noel reassured her that she hadn't decided yet and was still thinking about it. Alan gently told everyone to get some rest. While the others went to their rooms, Noel stayed awake, wondering what to do about becoming a leader. Before heading to bed, Alan asked Henriette why she had trusted the demon children to the elves. Henriette explained that she felt sorry for the demon children. Even though they hadn't done anything wrong, people tried to hurt them just because they thought demons were bad. She wanted to give the children a safe place to live. The next morning, Percival took Noel and her friends to a beautiful lake. While they were there, 2 demon children gave Noel a spirit stone as a gift. Noel was touched and thanked them, but Philip, who was nearby, got angry. He grabbed the stone and threw it into the lake. The demon children started crying in fear, and Philip ran away, upset. Henriette noticed that Philip had gone into town to cool off. She followed him and found him sitting in a narrow alley. She sat beside him and explained why the demon children needed kindness and a safe place to live. She encouraged Philip to try to be friends with them. Hearing this, Philip felt sorry for what he had done and apologized. After Henriette left, Philip decided to go back to the elf forest. However, on his way, he was stopped by Oswald, who threatened him and demanded that he show the way to the elf forest. In the dining room, the elves prepared a variety of colorful dishes for Noelle and the others. The table was filled with fresh vegetables and fruits, but Noelle didn't feel very hungry because she wanted to eat meat, which wasn't served. After the meal, Henriette said goodbye to head back to the Empire to look for Philip, who hadn't returned to the forest yet. Once she left, Percival showed Alan and the others the breathtaking beauty of the elf forest. Alan was so impressed that he thought about living there. Using his divine eyes, he could see the forest's peaceful history. Meanwhile, Noelle was still unsure about whether she should stay in the forest and take on the role of leader for the elves. A little while later, Percival sensed that a stranger had entered the forest. He quickly went to check and told Noelle and the others to return to the safety of the treehouse. At the treehouse, Noelle and Mylene were happily playing chess. On the other hand, Rhys asked Alan why he wanted to stay in the elf forest. Alan explained that the forest was peaceful and comfortable, and if he ever needed help, he could call Henriette. Rhys, feeling a little jealous, started to suspect Alan might have a special relationship with Henriette. Alan quickly reassured her that there was nothing like that between them. Hearing their conversation, Noelle and Mylene giggled and teased Alan, saying he sounded like a husband caught cheating. Noelle then told Rhys that she had decided to stay in the elf forest and would keep an eye on Alan. She also explained that the presence of many dwarves in the Empire made it a perfect place for her to continue her work as a blacksmith while leading the elves. Inspired by Noelle, Rhys and Mylene decided they would stay in the elf forest too, so they could all live together. The next day, Henriette returned to her home in the Empire and was shocked to find Lisette waiting for her. Lisette had discovered that Henriette was hiding Alan in the elf forest. This made Henriette very worried about Alan and the other's safety. At the same time, Oswald had entered the elf forest, with Philip reluctantly leading the way. When Percival met them, he noticed Philip looking upset and apologizing. Percival quickly realized that Oswald was part of the dangerous Black Wolf group Henriette had warned them about. Soon after, Oswald told Percival to hand over the criminal he thought was hiding in the forest. While they talked, two demon children came up to give Oswald gifts. But when Oswald realized they were demon children, he used his fire magic to try to hurt them. Suddenly, there was a loud explosion in the forest. Noelle and the others were startled. When Noelle saw the spirit stone from the demon children glowing, she knew something bad was happening. She and Mylene quickly ran to help the children. Alan wasn't sure if he should go because he didn't want to be a hero like in his past life. In the forest, Percival used his powers to protect the demon children from Oswald. But Oswald got angry and attacked Percival. Just as he was about to hurt the children again, Noelle and Mylene showed up to help. This made Oswald even angrier. He attacked the girls, and Percival tried to fight back with his sword, but Oswald was too strong. At the last moment, just as Oswald was about to hurt Percival, Alan arrived. He stepped in and used his strength to stop Oswald, defeating him and knocking him out. Later, Rhys came to help. She used her healing powers to heal Philip and everyone who was hurt. After that, Philip, who now accepted the demon children, was happily playing with them like they were friends. On the other hand, Mylene looked at Oswald lying helpless on the ground and asked what they should do with him. Before anyone could decide, Henriette suddenly appeared and said she would take care of it. She also told Alan and the others that the gates to the Empire were open, and they needed to leave quickly. Hearing this, Alan and his friends, including Noelle, decided it was time to leave the elf forest. Percival, though sad to see them go, promised to wait for Noelle to return after she achieved her dream. While they were packing, a young man named Curtis showed up, saying he was Henriette's younger brother. He told them he needed their help because Henriette had been captured by the Black Wolf Knights. Worried, Alan and the others followed Curtis to a nearby restaurant, where he explained what had happened. Curtis told them Henriette was being taken to the imperial capital to be punished for supposedly murdering the emperor. Everyone was shocked because Henriette was known as a kind and good noblewoman. Curtis explained that her kindness had made her many enemies who wanted to get rid of her. He begged Alan and the others to help save Henriette. After hearing his story, Alan and his friends started to feel suspicious. They remembered that Henriette had always said she was an only child, so Curtis's claim didn't make sense. Even though they thought it might be a trap, Alan decided they should follow Curtis's plan to find out the truth. Meanwhile, Henriette sat handcuffed in a horse-drawn carriage on the way to the imperial capital. Lisette was there too, keeping a close eye on her to make sure she didn't escape. Henriette reminded Lisette of their deal, that if Henriette took the blame for the Emperor's death, Lisette had to let Alan and the others go free. Henriette warned that if Lisette broke her promise, there would be consequences. Meanwhile, Alan and his friends met Curtis again. He had prepared a horse-drawn carriage for them to travel to the imperial capital. Next to Curtis was someone wearing armor. Alan asked who it was, and Curtis explained that this person was his trusted companion who would travel with them. Curtis assured everyone there was no need to worry. As they began their journey, Alan grew curious and asked Curtis who he really was and how he knew about them being friends with Henriette. Curtis explained that he was Henriette's cousin and saw her as an older sister. He shared how most of the Linkvis family didn't like him because he didn't have any special talents. Henriette was the only one who was kind to him and spent time with him. However, Curtis's parents didn't want him to be close to Henriette, so he could only admire her from afar. Because he often watched over her, he knew that Alan and the others were her friends. In the evening, the carriage carrying Henriette stopped so everyone could rest. There, Henriette told Lisette she should rest too, but Lisette refused. She said her orders were to watch Henriette at all times. Henriette didn't argue and quietly prepared to sleep. Deep down, she felt happy knowing she could protect Alan and his friends, even if it meant sacrificing herself. The next morning, Alan and his group reached the Imperial Gate, but found it closed. The Black Wolf Knights were guarding it, making it impossible to pass. Alan suggested they gather information to find out why the gates were shut again. Curtis agreed but told Noelle and Mylene not to wander around since elves like them would stand out and attract attention. Shortly after, Alan and Reese decided to head to the Adventurers Guild to look for answers. Meanwhile, Curtis, Noelle, Mylene, and the others went to an inn to wait for their return. At the Adventurers Guild, Alan and Reese wore robes to hide their identities and avoid being recognized. Back at the inn, Mylene grew curious about Curtis's armored companion. She asked to see the face behind the armor, but the person refused. Curtis explained that his trusted companion was very shy and didn't like taking off the armor in front of strangers. At the Adventurers Guild, Alan and Reese found out that the Black Wolf Knights had closed the gates. They were searching for a group of 6, trying to leave the Empire. Then, Alan quickly realized that the group they were looking for was probably them. He and Reese decided to hurry back to the inn to warn their friends. Before they could leave, a Black Wolf Knight entered the guild and announced they were hunting for a suspicious group. They even promised a reward of gold coins to anyone who helped find them. One of the adventurers pointed to the table where Alan and Reese had been sitting, saying they looked suspicious. But when the knights checked, the table was already empty because Alan and Reese had left just in time. The Black Wolf Knights rushed outside to look for them. On the way, Alan and Reese managed to escape after one of the knights accidentally bumped into a boy, causing confusion. As Alan and Reese hid, they suddenly heard a loud explosion coming from the inn where Curtis had rented rooms for them. Alarmed, they ran toward the sound and found the inn in ruins. Standing among the debris was Oswald, holding Noelle and Mylene, who were unconscious. Alan and Reese were shocked to see their friends captured. The anime ends. The moral lesson from this anime is getting disowned could be your ticket to slaying dragons and becoming a hero. So if your parents yell at you, pack a bag, you're probably destined for greatness. Also, never call your lazy sibling useless, cause they might save your life with magic while you're still grumbling about chores.